Hey, everybody. Welcome to NASIG's Continuing Education webinar series. Um, Before we begin, I just want to go through a few logistics. I wanted to share some information about accessing past and future webinars. If you're interested in learning more about previous webinars, you can find archived webinars at the link on the slide, as well as on the Continuing Education Committee webinar YouTube channel. That's also noted on the slide. Our next webinar about the NASIG mentoring program will be held on April 8th. So please register at nasig.org/webinars if you're interested in that one. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to ask attendees to please use the chat for questions. We're going to have time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, but Tasha has agreed to take questions along the way. So if you have questions along the way, please put those in the chat and I'll try to draw Tasha's attention to those. So I'm going to stop sharing and Tasha is going to share her screen and then I'll begin with the bio. All right, cool. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's presentation, Usage Metrics for AI, OA, and More. Tasha Mellons-Cohen, Executive Director at Counter Metrics and founder of Mellons-Cohen Consulting, has been part of the knowledge community since 2001. She has held roles within learned societies and commercial publishers across operations, technology, editorial, and executive functions, while donating time to key initiatives and bodies such as UKSG, Counter, and STM. In 2020, she started consulting in response to requests to help in developing and implementing OA business models in not-for-profit groups. And in 2022, she stepped up from volunteering to run Counter, the standard for usage metrics, alongside her consulting work. For additional information about our speaker, you can also see our speaker bios on the NASIG website. So now I'm going to turn things over to Tasha. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, NASIG, for having me to talk to you today. I'm going to assume that everybody on this call knows what Counter is, and that we have been the standard for usage metrics for about 23 years now. So we were founded in 2003. The world has changed. So I want to talk to you today about how the existing code of practice is a foundation on which we as a community can build. And when I say a foundation, what we've been talking about for the last 23 years, or what we started as, was a way to measure return on investment and usage of content that was traditionally licensed, so subscriptions or ebooks that had been purchased. In an open access world, or a world in which usage is syndicated across multiple platforms, how does that work? And now with AI, we've got even more challenges ahead of us. As a community-led organization, Counter is responding to these challenges by bringing together community members to address them piece by piece and build guidelines for reporting all of these different types of usage in a way that builds on the established code. So what is that code? Why does it matter? For those of you who've been doing this as long as I have, you'll remember that way back in the early part of this millennium, century, whatever you want to frame it as, every publisher was measuring digital content or measuring usage of digital content differently. Publishers reported that differently, and libraries therefore didn't know who to trust or what measures to trust. So we defined an open standard brought together by libraries and publishers working collectively that set out normalized metrics that you can understand. You will always know if you're looking at a Counter metric, you can go and look at the code and understand how it was derived. And our metrics are always privacy protective by design. You will never see user data in a Counter report, just aggregate usage information. By contrast, web analytics are rather more commercial, they're rather more opaque. As the wonderful Charles Watkinson once said, if you're comparing countermetrics with web analytics, you're not comparing apples with apples. You're not even necessarily comparing apples with oranges. You're comparing apples with beach balls. They're just full of hot air. So, having said that we've been around for 23 years, we have had to change to adapt to the changing nature of publishing and the changing nature of library consumption over that time. Most recently, we put out release 5.1 of the Counter Code of Practice. That was published in 2023. It came into force in January of 2025, and just to bust a couple of myths, coming into force in January 2025 meant that the first reports became available in February 2025. We didn't start enforcement in February. That would be mad. We aim for a full calendar year. It takes about 3 years from first kicking off a breaking release project to implementation. So they are not a quick process. And that's partly because it takes about 18 months for publishers and for library technology groups to update their software to work with the new iteration of the standard. And it's partly because we spend an awful lot of time in community consultation. So we're committed to not doing one of these more than once every 5 years. Apart from anything else, I'm quite grey enough already. So I'm not going to run through the details of this slide, but just to flag that many libraries talk to me. I had contact last year with around 4,000 libraries and publishers around the world. And while there are common patterns in how libraries use Counter, they are not all doing the same thing. Not every library is just using Counter to assess cancellation options. Not every library is using it just to look at demand-driven acquisition. There's a real range. And similarly, there is a real range in how publishers are using Counter reports. While historically many have seen it as a sales tool, more and more publishers have started to use it as business intelligence throughout the company. So helping to inform editorial commissioning strategies, for example. Again, I can go into these in more detail if anyone wants, but I'd rather get into the AI stuff, and I suspect you would as well. Before I jump into AI, however, free stuff. We've got lots and lots and lots of freely available education materials on our website. I am in the middle of converting oral PDFs into full text HTML, so you'll be able to see those coming into a much more readable format over the next few weeks. But there's always more to find on the website and more coming on a weekly basis. So let's rip off the plaster, or I suppose you're all mostly North Americans, so Band-Aid. We don't have all the answers for AI yet. It's a very rapidly evolving topic, and we've been working on it, and I'm going to tell you where we're at, but I make no pretenses that this is perfect at this point. So let's start with why. Just to be very, very clear, that number across the bottom, those years across the bottom, if it wasn't clear enough from the fact that it goes to 2027, this is not a real usage report. This has been put together based on a lot of information that I've had from libraries around the world who've been sending me usage reports going back 4 or 5 years, and then showing really, really rapid decreases starting in 2024 and then in the words of one lovely librarian I spoke to on Monday, plummeting in 2025. We suspect, based on the context, that this is because users are relying on generated summaries in a way that wasn't previously possible. These AI answer engines, large language models, whatever you want to call them, are very sophisticated summarization tools. They have created a fundamental and profound shift in how researchers, whether they're tenure track or postgrads or PhD students or even undergraduate students, This is a fundamental shift in how people interact with content. Many students have reported that they are relying on generated summaries, taking lists of citations if they are available, and just assuming that everything is correct. I'm sure the librarians who are on the call now will be able to tell horror stories of students coming and asking for help finding an article or a book chapter, only to realise that this is a hallucination. All of which is a challenge, because if AI systems are disintermediating libraries and publishers, how do we as a community teach research quality assessment? How do we teach information literacy if nobody's looking at the source material? How do we as publishers know what we're selling? How do we as libraries know what we're buying? And how do we measure return on investment in those content investments that we're making? So whether that's purchasing access to content or publishing it in the first place, that's an investment that we need to justify. So this is why Counter started working on AI. And here is what we're tracking. I mentioned that it takes 3 years to get a breaking release out the door. ChatGPT, if you will remember 2024 or 2023, as it were, we first really got to grips with ChatGPT about 2 weeks before release 5.1 was approved for publication. There was simply no way for us to put the brakes on at that point and say, we're going to wait and see what this AI stuff does before we put 5.1 out the door. So I know that some people are frustrated that we're talking about AI now when we should, quote unquote, have baked it into release 5.1, ready for it to be implemented in January last year. It just wasn't possible. So in 2025, we started developing best practice guidelines for AI usage, and we have 3 pieces of the puzzle. And there are 2 pieces that we have tackled immediately. So that is the types of users, and I'll come to those in a minute, and the AI usage happening on publisher platforms. So things like ProQuest's Research Assistant. There is a phase 2 that is going to be looking at how third-party tools, so things like Cite, Consensus, Perplexity, if we can make them play nicely, Claude or Gemini, we need to know how they could report this stuff back. But we figured let's get the bulk of the project done and then move on to these third parties. So, as with any Counter best practice, we start with spinning up a working group because we always take a community approach to our work. Counter, in terms of staffing, is me, not even the whole of me. So I'm not going to sit and dictate for the entire world what Counter needs to look like. What I will do is facilitate my community to develop what they want to develop. We started working on this in June of last year. We came up with a set of draft recommendations. So if you want to talk about speed, MCP, the Model Context Protocol, which is proving very popular for allowing third-party tools like Cite to gain access to publisher records, only came into our conversations in November. So that's just a week before our recommendations went up for public consultation. That community consultation stayed open until the end of February. And that was because AI usage was a huge discussion point at the NISO Plus conference, which I made sure to attend, and we wanted to incorporate as much as possible of that feedback. So right now we're doing that. We're revising and sort of really getting into the weeds of a best practice guideline that needs to look like and work with and not break the Counter Code of practice. So we're really into the technical implementation details. Our goal is to go to the executive committee for final approval in April and then publish. So we're not trying to delay things, but we are trying to do it sensibly. So first part of our puzzle was, who are the users? We have to update the old Counter definition of bots to take account of the fact that the world is much more nuanced today than it was when we were first saying all bots are bad. Um, that's not true. It probably was never true. There are humans. They need to have access, and their usage needs to be reported as human, which in counter terms is regular usage. There are valid bots that should be getting access to publisher content. So, for example, Google Scholars crawlers are bots who should be able to get into the content. But that usage should never be reported under counter because these are crawlers, they're bots. They're not doing anything useful from an institutional perspective with the content. There are malign bots, obviously, that should be blocked completely. But today there are also AI agents. So whether those are embedded on a publisher's site or created and run by researchers from their own laptops, there's, or indeed from third parties, these agents need to sort of be reflected in counter usage. So we're in the process right now of updating section 7.8, I think, of the Code of Practice, which is all about bots. That is going to be updated as part of a fixed release that we're doing at the moment. But we're also, as part of the AI best practice, introducing a new access method called agent to specify AI usage of materials. Now, this builds on our existing access method attribute. So I've talked about counter being a foundation. This is a new brick in the wall. So our new access method agent will be coming in to help you distinguish AI usage from regular usage, or indeed regular usage through a TDM service. Hot off the press, I can tell you these are the AI usage metrics that we're talking about. So for those of you who are familiar with Counter already, you'll already understand the concept of investigations and requests, whereby an investigation reflects any interaction with content and a request reflects interaction with the full text. From an AI perspective, from an agentic perspective, we are intending to have total and unique AI investigations and total and unique AI requests. And in this particular case, requests will reflect content that the AI can access in full, not necessarily that an AI has downloaded a PDF, because it just wouldn't. We've also decided, in response to the consultation, to add a new generated responses metric, or responses generated. That is similar to the old searches platform, in as much as searches platform will tell you, this user ran a search and they got a series of results. The AI responses generated metric will say this user put in a prompt and got a generated response to that prompt. So that's sort of trying to help you have something that you can compare like with like. And the thing that's going to be quite interesting, I think, is to see the shift in search to generated responses over time. Have we got any questions yet? Sorry, I'm realizing I'm rattling on because I know we're tight on time.
Not yet.
Excellent. Well, I will keep going.
Great.
So we still have work to do. We're trying to, as I said, get the best practice to the executive committee in April. Caveat for the librarians who are among us, who I know from the conversations I've had, many of you are absolutely desperate to start seeing these usage metrics now. It's going to take time for publishers to develop this reporting with the very best will in the world, and a lot of them are incredibly keen to do it. It's not a quick thing to develop new parts of the Counter Code of Practice. So please don't expect for us to publish this in the second half of April and for AI usage metrics to start showing up in May. I wish it was that simple, but it's not. As soon as we wrap up with publishing the best practice, however, we will start on the guidelines for third parties. And from the conversations that we've had to date with those third parties, we think it's going to sort of loop in our existing syndicated usage policy to help guide how those third parties can give institutional and global AI usage reporting back to the source publishers. So that's AI.
Tasha,
Shall I move on to OA, or have we got questions now?
we
Because I
got a
can see
couple
things
more.
popping in the
Yep,
chat.
yep. We got a couple more that came in.
Okay.
First one from Misty. Will this change only record usage for platforms with AI overlays, or will generative AI usage still not be captured?
So I'm going to assume that when you say generative AI usage, you're talking about the third parties like Claude or ChatGPT. And those are the third parties which we really, really want to get engaged with. Now, there's some sort of edge cases there. So if a publisher is allowing a third party access to their content through an MCP, they'll know how many AI investigations and requests there have been. They just won't necessarily know how many generated responses there were. Where there's no direct connection like that. MCP, for those of you who, like me, are sort of technical, but only enough to know what you don't know, I'm thinking of MCP as being like an API on steroids. So you've got a lot of information going backwards and forwards. Where there's no such connection, so for example, where less kindly AI operators have decided to just scrape a load of content and not tell anyone about it, there is no way for a publisher to track that information. So we'll only be able to get that usage information if we can get those third parties to play nicely. I'm trying. I know the publishers are also trying. We're all pushing them quite hard, but yeah, with the very best will in the world, I am a half a person band. There is not much that I can do that's going to make Anthropic play nicely. If I could, I think I would be doing other things. Next question.
All right. Will the AI agent searches be only in the access methods, or will they also be in the main reports, i.e. TRB1, TRJ1, etc.?
That's like a strike to the heart. Okay, I'm going to try not to get on my hobby horse. There are 4 counter reports. There's the platform report, the database report, the title report, and the item report. The standard views, like the TRJ1 and the TRB1, are teeny tiny little snippets that were designed purely to help you guys get from release 4 to release 5. 90% of the questions that come to me from libraries asking for help with their reports are because they're using the wrong report. So I'm going to beg you, please stop looking at the standard views. Please use the actual reports. You are missing so much information if you're only looking at the views. AI will only show up in the main reports, just as TDM does. TDM doesn't show in any of the standard views either. So it will only show, for example, in the title report. You will never see it in a standard view. And I'm going to say this again. I figure if I say this often enough, by the time we get to a future 5.2 consultation, you'll be sick of me saying it. I want to get rid of standard views. They are just awful. Sorry. I know many libraries love them, but that would be my single biggest wish for counter. More even than having a full-time member of staff. Let's get rid of standard views.
Amen.
Sorry to
That's all
whoever
right.
asked
That's all
that
right.
question. That's like a little hot button thing that nobody should ever ask me.
Well, there is one more request.
Sure.
Um, would you mind defining AI investigations again?
All right. So just as in traditional countermetrics, every single interaction with a piece of content is an investigation. In an AI world, so with access method agent, every interaction with a chunk of a piece of content is a total AI investigation. The best practice guidelines have got this written out in very, 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 very clear, very defined language. Um, but you can basically think of chunks. So AI tools don't look at the entire article. So if we think about journal articles, an AI tool doesn't look at an entire article. They look at chunks of content, which is maybe somewhere between 200 and 300 words. That's kind of a normal chunk length. So if the AI tool only has access to the article metadata, that might be 300 words within the abstract. That would be one chunk. That's going to be one total AI investigation. If the AI tool has access to the whole article and it looks at 12 different chunks from different parts of the article, that would be 12 AI investigations, but it would also be 12 total AI requests because a request is a subset of an investigation. But just as we do with regular usage, we're asking publishers to deduplicate the totals to uniques. So you'll see there might be 1,500 total item investigations over the course of 1 month for one particular journal, but that might roll up to only 12 unique total item investigations if it's just happened on 12 separate occasions. I think I'm now getting myself confused. I've got some really nice graphics on the education pages for, well, actually, if I show you countermetrics/education/metrics rather than /open access, there's some really nice graphics about how investigations and requests fit together. And I'm going to be doing something similar for how AI investigations and requests fit together. So that's probably better than me trying to explain it without having a diagram in front of you.
No, that was very good, and the chat agrees that that was very clear. Thank you. And that and,
So I
and that
it's
was it.
currently 5:30 in the evening here, and I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning, and I've been to London and back, and my brain is starting to get a little bit frazzled.
You're doing fabulous, and that's all the
Excellent.
questions we have right now.
Okay. Shall we move on to open access? Or do we have more AI questions?
I think we can move on. That's all I see right now.
Cool. We can come back. If you think of something, we can come back. So, OA. Institutional counter reports, the ones that you are really familiar with, only show the usage from your library, your university. In release 5, Counter introduced the concept of global reporting, which brings together all of the usage from every single institution around the world and from every user that cannot be tied to an institution, brings it all together into one place and reports it as a single global counter report. Now, the reason why this matters for open access is that for many years, and I wrote my first OA policy, which was embargo-free green, in 2005. But for many years, OA advocates have been saying that open access is a way of driving increased usage. But going back to our apples and beach balls comparison from earlier, if you're measuring the open access usage with, say, Google Analytics rather than with Counter, then yeah, your numbers are going to look huge, but they're not being measured on a like-for-like basis with subscription content. So we strongly recommend providing global reports for any OA publisher or any publisher with OA content within an otherwise hybrid portfolio. I'm going to assume that you've read the open access friendly guide and you don't need me to go through the details of attribution. But just to sort of flag that you can use Counter for OA in different ways depending on what you're trying to achieve. So the global report, so let's think about a global title report. If you are participating in a subscribe to open journal, you might want to know how that journal's doing in a usage sense from before it was open. So, what was our global usage when it was still behind a paywall? and what's the global usage now that we have helped to make this open access. And we can break those global reports down by country, sometimes by state, if the report provider has that level of granularity. And that's a really helpful way of looking at the impact of investments in open access. Now, obviously, for publishers who are operating, say, article processing charge or otherwise transactional deals where you're paying at an article level to have content made open, you probably are going to want a global item report to start looking at being able to provide reporting back to the funder of that research to say, well, you've helped us pay to make this open access, you funded the research, here is your return on investment, here is the OA cost per download. And you might still want institutional reports from OA providers to see what's happening to your internal usage and what those trends are over time. Now, that's a bit challenging for OA only providers. I mean, it's fantastic if you've got a hybrid setup and you can see, you know, how much of your internal usage is of open content versus controlled content. But many of the open access publishers like MDPI, which are counter compliant, simply don't have a way of providing institution reports in quite as simple a manner because they don't have that kind of customer setup in their back end. So the reason I wanted to talk a bit about OA is because just as we've done best practice guidance on artificial intelligence, we are literally in the next day or so going to be spinning up a new working group on extending our best practice guidance for reporting open access usage. My rate limiting step here is that I'm going to the UKSG conference next week and I can't do it until I get back. But we will be putting out the open access friendly guide in HTML format and pushing an announcement about the new working group out on our blog before the end of this week. So we do have a couple of spaces for people who are specialists in or interested in open access reporting who are not already part of our advisory committee. So if you're interested and you want to get involved, just email me. It's tasha@countermetrics.org. It's kind of hard to mess that one up. And please let me know, because it would be great to have a few more voices. I'm going to guess, I can't see anything popping up in the chat, so I'm going to guess I can move on from OA and moving to syndicated usage. So this is really interesting because it touches on both the open access piece and on AI. And the reason that we've got to think about this is that content syndication is becoming really, really common, particularly where you've got, say, open access books that might live on 10 or more platforms and be accessed in all of those different places. How do you as a publisher or how do you as a library understand holistically the usage of that content? Publishers need to know because they need to know if it's worth investing in that syndication. It's not easy to do syndication well. And libraries need to know because if they've purchased access through, say, JSTOR and you don't purchase through DOAB, but if you're using content in JSTOR and DOAB, plus on the publisher's original platform, that's going to give you a much more comprehensive idea of whether your students, your staff, your faculty are using this material. So we came up with this syndicated usage best practice in 2024, pretty sure. And the idea behind it is that if, moving on, if syndication platforms are counter compliant, and as an example, ResearchGate is counter compliant and they are already delivering usage reports through this syndicated usage best practice. So where there is a syndication platform that is counter compliant, they can send counter usage data back to the original publisher, who can then report it on to their institutions. They can either report it as global usage, And we've recommended to all of the syndication platforms that they should all be sending global usage data, either as raw data or as a global item report to the original publisher. And syndication platforms and the original publisher can collaborate to share institutional usage data. What we have said is the identifiers have to match. So what I mean is if both the source publisher and the syndication platform are using, for example, the PSI IP registry, that's fine because that is a shared IP database. The institutional identifiers will match. If they're using getFTR, that's fine. The institutional identifiers would match. Shibboleth, ditto, that can be very specifically tied to a single institution. Explicit matching is how ResearchGate works. They've got very careful verification of institutional email addresses. What we've said you can't do is make guesses. So if the syndication platform is using the PSI IP registry, but the publisher has their own database, that would be best guess institutional matching, and that is not allowed in our syndicated usage policy. So that has been an endless source of discussion and debate. Syndication platform can report directly to libraries, and the libraries can then synthesize their usage data from all the different places. The original publisher can report the syndicated usage to libraries as part of the aggregate reports if they want it. Now, the reason this is relevant, as I've said, a lot of OA content is massively syndicated, but as we've already touched on, AI services are not typically all on publisher platforms. So if we want the sites and the consensuses and perplexities and all the rest of them to start sharing usage data in compliance with our AI best practice, it's likely to be through our syndication best practice as well. I think we've still got 10 minutes left, so I'm just going to throw this up and say you can always get in touch with me. I am not always super speedy at replying to my emails, and I think I saw Karen Harker on the attendee list earlier, and she will attest to the fact that I can sometimes take a week to get back to you, but I will always try to get back to you by the close of Friday afternoon because I like a clear mailbox before I shut down for the weekend. But there's lots and lots and lots of ways to get involved. So free stuff on our website, there's the listserv, there's the newsletter, tools and services, but you can also do stuff like help us by volunteering for committees and working groups if you think you can face more of the chaos monkey energy that is coming from this side of the screen. So that is me. I am going to stop sharing and invite more questions because I'm hoping there are some.
We have one from James. James says, "Thank you very much for this wonderful session. Can a librarian participate in the Counter Academy if their institute is not a counter member, but their consortia is a member?"
So, no, that's the short answer. We want to make as much available as we can to as many people as we can, but we have had to restrict some things to members only, full members only, and that is the Counter Academy. And standing for election to the board is also only open to members. What you can do, and I'm aware that this may not be for everybody, but we introduced the Library Network and Consortium affiliate rate this year, 2026. So if your consortium is a member, you as an organization can join Counter for, I can't remember the US dollar rate, but it's £145 in the UK. So I think, $220 for the year. And that would give you access to the Academy. We've mostly been able, thanks to some generous publishers, to give Academy spaces to libraries for free. But we can't just open it up to everybody, I'm afraid.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see, back to the AI usage. Is it institutional or global? I'd
Mhm.
imagine it'll be difficult to determine whether an AI usage comes from a specific institution unless the AI tool is through institution authentication.
So this goes back again to that first party, third party division. So the first party, if you are on, and I'm just going to keep using ProQuest Research Assistant because it's actually quite a cool tool. If you're on ProQuest and you're using Research Assistant, then ProQuest knows who you are, or they know which institution you're affiliated with. So that's easy. They can put all of that AI usage to your institution. The third party, so Consensus or Site, they've been really helpful, so I keep going to them as my defaults. Um, if you are using Model Context Protocol, MCP, with them, in many, 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 many cases, that is tied to institutional affiliation as well. So that information does go back from the third party to the publisher. So the publisher will be able to see which institution or which institution's license is being used to access that data on the third party tool. So it's possible. It's not easy, but it is feasible.
Okay. Let's see. Will publishers be required to provide the access report with AI data?
The access report? I'm sorry if you
Emily,
could
do you have any more?
clarify that one.
Yeah, right. And the person before just said, I see, so it depends on the third party tools.
Many, many, many things depend on the third party tools, which is why we put that in as phase two, because we wanted to get the foundation right before we built on the superstructure.
Right. I'm not seeing a clarification yet from Emily.
So,
Here she goes. Sorry, I thought the AI agent were in the access report.
so we don't have an access report, but I think you may mean access method agent. So yes, access method agent, the new AI metrics will only ever show up with access method agent. They will never show up with the like human usage. And they will appear in either, they will appear in the platform database title and item reports. They will only appear on request. You're not going to get them just dumped into your mailbox or dumped into your reports unless you request them. So basically, under the main reports, the four reports, you have the option to say, I want all of the attributes in there. So I want to see access method agent. I want to see all of my access methods as well as my data types and my years of publication and whatever. Um, but yeah, you will have to request access method agent and then you will get the relevant AI metrics.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, Emily clarified. She said, yes, access method, TDM, AI, etc. Will publishers be required to supply this information?
Okay, so any best practice is just that. It's a best practice. It is not mandatory any more than the global item report is mandatory at the moment. We are encouraging people to develop out that set of metrics, but we can't enforce it unless we make a breaking change, which would be a release 5.2, which would take way more consultation than we have done. One of the many reasons that we did it as a best practice is that we want to be able to have the flexibility to change if we discover over the next 6 to 12 months that this doesn't work. Having a best practice rather than a formal breaking change, which is mandatory, means that we've got the flexibility to change without completely destroying systems for every publisher and every library.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's see. Any other questions? Let's see. What's your timeline to have the AI usage access methods reports available?
uh, we're just defining how to do it. The publishers are going to have to build it out. And I honestly don't know because they don't know yet how long it's going to take them to build it out because they don't know what our best practice is going to be. So it's a bit of a chicken and an egg. I'm hoping that when the guidelines go out and we've got the actual technical implementation specification, the publishers will then be able to come back to me and say it's going to take us X time to get that out the door, and then I'll be able to include that information in news updates. We will be updating the registry to reflect publishers who do offer AI when it comes on stream. There's various other registry projects that we want to do this year as well that will also enhance information that's available. But yeah, sorry, that's not a very good answer. It's how long is a
All
piece of
right.
string?
It's the way it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Any other questions from attendees? Just sort of looking through the chat. I think we've answered everything that's come in so far. Let's see. Okay. Um, well, Tasha, I'd like to thank you. This has been a great presentation, super helpful. I know for me to hear all the things that are happening with Counter, especially with AI and OA. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Please complete the evaluation survey, which will come your way soon by email, along with today's slides. And remember to register for next month's presentation on the NASIG mentoring program. And that's all for today. And thanks again, Tasha. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, everybody. Bye.